And joining us now in our book talk segment, great to welcome Ann, who's written a great historical novel. He just specializes in that. This one is called Mademoiselle Chanel, and we're joined today by C.W. Gortner on the telephone. And C.W., good to talk.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have a chance to chat with you for a couple of minutes. Now, the only reason I know about Coco Chanel, I know there was a Broadway show about her a long time ago. I remember hearing about that, and I don't know much else about her. So you'll have to tell me about what brought you the interest of writing this is based on her life, but a kind of a fictionalized story about her. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a novel in first person. It's her voice. I went to fashion school to be a designer, but I was terrible at sewing and pattern making, so I segued into marketing, and my thesis project was done on Chanel. I basically took all of her signature designs and presented on how I would be marketing them in today's world. I later on worked in fashion for 12 years, and Chanel was always sort of a part of our lexicon. You know, she's got great sayings like less is more, and, you know, put a lot of things on and then take two things off. And so she was always a part of my world when I was working in fashion. And then, you know, I became a full-time writer and was writing historical novels about powerful women in history. But Chanel was kind of a daring, and she'd simmered in the back of my mind as a book to write, but she was out of my brand, and I knew I was going to have to carve out some time to write her. And I just fortunately got a break between two contracted manuscripts where I had some time. So I decided to play to see if I could get a sense of her voice, a sense of who she was. And it started really working. I became obsessed. And the more I researched her life, the woman behind the icon became more and more alive. Because a lot of the tumultuous things she lived through kind of fuel what comes out in her fashion. So the links were so wonderful to make. You couldn't make this stuff up. I mean, it truly is real life is stranger than fiction.
She came from really a very poor beginning. Late 1800s she was born, and basically kind of invented herself into what she became, right? I mean, you wouldn't have expected it from her upbringing, what she later became.
No, absolutely not. She came from a very impoverished childhood. Her mother died when she was 12. Her father was a marketplace vendor who didn't want to assume responsibility for the children. Though he also had paternal family, they turned their back. And he broke up the family. He sent her two brothers to work on farms, which was common in those days with impoverished children. And he sent Chanel and her sisters into this convent. Chanel's 12 years old, and suddenly she's been abandoned by the only family she knows. I think that abandonment really fueled her character. It kind of forged in her the sense that she couldn't depend on anybody, that anything she wanted she had to get on her own. And it seeds this steely determination to succeed. Even though when she got out of the convent and had to go to work, she was a good seamstress, so one of the options open door was to work as a seamstress, and she did. She really had no sense of what she wanted to do. She became a torch singer for a while, which is where the name Coco comes from. Mm-hmm. But she really doesn't know what she's going to do until she starts working with hats, because one of her paternal aunts, who did actually track her down, made hats, overflow hats for the resort market. And, you know, of course, they were hats from the era, those big fruit platter hats. They probably weighed a ton. And Chanel was so horrified by them, she'd strip them down to their essence. And that kind of sets the stage for her emergence into fashion.
Yeah, what was kind of the term, I guess, break in show business? What was her break to become well known as a designer? Was there one thing, or was it a series of things?
Well, it was several things. She met a man while she was trying to break into torch singing because she wasn't selling any of the hats she was making. He was a wealthy, the son of a wealthy Lyons cloth merchant family who, like many well-educated aristocratic men, was also rather eccentric. He liked horse racing. He liked to hang out with the avant-garde. And he offered to bring Chanel to his chateau and live with him as his mistress, which in those days was literally a path to ruin for most girls, because you didn't live with a man you were intending on marrying. But he gave her this space to create her hats, and he had these weekend gatherings where he brought in all kinds of people. And some of the people that he knew in his circle were courtesans. And in those days, courtesans were one of the few women that were making their own hours, making their own money. They also worked as actresses, and they took to Chanel's hats. They loved this new, simplified look, and they wore them on stage. They wore them about Paris, and that kind of set the stage for her realizing that she had something that she could make. And then she fell in love with an Englishman named Boy Capel, who took her to Paris to live with him. And he was very much like her. He didn't come from an impoverished family, but he was very determined. He ran his own businesses. And he and Chanel were kind of perfect matches for each other, because he supported her ambition and helped finance her first shot. And that's where it all starts, is with that relationship in Paris.
Kind of like designers have actors and actresses wear their clothing on the red carpet today on television. I guess she did a version of that then, right? With the actresses of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
high society women.
Courtesans were well known in Paris. They were actresses, and that was publicity.
Well, talk a little bit about the story you wrote based on her life. How did you come up with the plot line, and give a synopsis of that?
I basically, I studied a great deal about her life. The book takes place from her childhood when she's 12, the death of her mother, through her World War II years. I was very determined to go into the areas of Chanel's life that are either heavily criticized or a lot of writers would shy away from because it's so controversial, sort of her collaboration with the Nazis. But I really wanted to get a sense of the totality. And with Chanel, the arc of the life is it's almost perfect, from this impoverished, you don't know where she's going to end up, to what she ends up doing in Paris during the occupation. It involved a lot of research, a lot of reading of different bios, getting a sense of what facts I wanted to cover, because, of course, a life is much larger than a finite amount of words, so I had to pick and choose. But I think the most challenging part was trying to getting a sense of getting inside of her skin. How did she feel about things? Her psychological and emotional outlook. What was going on around her? What extenuating circumstances influenced her? And that's kind of an inexplicable process that writers go through, trying to get into the skin of your character.
Yeah, there was.
You've got to base it on what you know. You can't make things up. But you also have to have enough fluidity enough understanding of human nature to find a place where you're empathetic with your character and you're not judging. I leave the judging to the readers.
Were there any interviews, probably not recorded interviews, but maybe written interviews, you get a sense of how she talks?
I met one person who had worked with her in Paris in her much later years, in the 60s, where she was much older and very different from the young woman. But that person gave me a great sense of her physicality, what she was like physically, how she moved, how she spoke, sort of her energy level. She apparently was extraordinarily energetic and very devoted to her work and very opinionated. And that gave me a great insight into how she moved and felt and expressed herself, which really helped. It was a brief interview. We were only on the phone for like an hour, but this person was very generous with their insights, and it really helped me get a sense of her. But that's always key. And I've never had that chance before because all the characters I've written about before have been, dead for 300 years.
Right.
Or more.
And I guess that's the same Chanel.
There's nobody alive.
Chanel No. 5, the perfume, and that's the same Chanel, right? That still lives to today, the brand, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's still one of the most best-selling perfumes in the world. And no designer before Chanel had ever successfully marketed a signature perfume. Designers had done them, but they gave them away as gifts in their ateliers to retain customers and create goodwill. And No. 5 was also one of the first perfumes developed that matched synthetic compounds with real, natural scents to create a long-lasting perfume. Nowadays, every perfume has that. But before Chanel, she was harnessing a pretty new science of new chemistry. And she created this very unique smell that sort of adapted to every woman and lasted. That was her key. She wanted a scent that would last. Because scents before that time, because they were naturally based, they faded very quickly.
Well, really one of the great historical figures in real life, and also the branding as well. The name Chanel is known worldwide, and this book is called Mademoiselle Chanel. We've been talking with C.W. Gortner today. Do you have a website you can direct people to?
Yes, people can definitely visit me. It's www.cwgortner.com. There's a page all about the book. There's buy links. There's also a Pinterest logo icon, and if you click on that, you can go to my Pinterest boards. I set up 7 boards about Chanel, and they're full of great photographs of her candid, early advertising, photographs of the dresses that she actually designed that remain, that are mostly in museums now. And readers are really enjoying reading the book and visiting the boards because it gives them such a visual sense of what's behind the book. And that was great fun to compile.
Yeah, great character to write about. And C.W. Gortner, pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again down the road. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or DougMilesMedia.